Williams was arrested and charged with manslaughter for stabbing 36-year-old Victor Udrago to death on a J train in Brooklyn 2 weeks ago. From the beginning, Williams said he acted in self-defense.
Did you know that when the Daniel Penny case was going down, that there was another case with almost identical details that was going down? One significant difference between the two cases was that the defendant, Jordan Williams, not to be confused with Jordan Neely, was black. Nate the Lawyer, the YouTube channel I'll link below, does an amazing breakdown of the comparisons between these two cases. I'm going to play it and I'm going to respond to it. Let me know what you think. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video where I'll give my final breakdown of this whole thing.
I was scared in that situation.
All right, in the aftermath of the Daniel Penny incident, a lot of people ask, well, what if Daniel Penny, the white guy, happened to be black? Well, we have the answer to that because this is Jordan Williams, not Neely, but Jordan Williams. Now, Jordan Williams was riding the train and insane, crazy person came on the train and Mr. Williams stabbed him to death in quote unquote self-defense. But we'll see how that case was handled differently than the case of Daniel Penny. Strap up. It's going to be interesting.
Really. Oh, one last thing before we get into the meat of this video. Again, y'all, you're going to want to stick around and follow this video. Excellent breakdown. But I'll share some statistics of what happens when a black person is actually in a life or death, potentially self-defense case. How does that work out for us? Does it usually go in our favor or against us? I'll share some stats. And again, I think you're going to be shocked as to what you find out.
So with this story with Jordan Williams, we're going to start with the body cam footage. You have men on the train who are harassing passengers, but they're not harassing passengers threatening to kill them, just the normal kind of lunatic harassment that happens on the train. You'll see. No one's being threatened to be killed, but you'll see how things escalate to one person is eventually stabbed.
You understand what I'm saying? Stop it. No, you see this? Why don't we put that man?
I'm stopping it here because this is like normal stuff that happens in New York. I've ridden the subway for many, many years, and you have people like this that come around and beg for change and, you know, will say stuff to you and all that stuff. But again, this is no reason why someone should be stabbed, right?
No, I agree that no one should be stabbed, but if you get into my face or my lady's face on the subway train, you've been drinking or under the influence or just acting weird. First of all, you're not going to get that close because you're going to get checked in a heartbeat before you even get that close. I'm going to put my hand up, stand up. There's going to be a confrontation before it even gets to that level. But I know everyone's different. Not everyone feels confident enough to stand up to craziness or foolishness. But I'm just saying what I'm used to doing or what I think I would have done, because that right there is just out of line. And again, dude didn't deserve to be stabbed, but you ain't going to be getting all up in my face or my lady's face or anybody I love's face without me giving a strong response.
Right? This guy's just essentially just walking around. They seem to be intoxicated and they're not saying we're going to kill everybody on the train and I'm looking to go to jail and I'm going to kill it. I'm not taking no for an answer. None of that's going on here. Seems pretty.
Make sure you're paying attention to the details in these different cases, y'all. One group, these guys are acting ignorant, getting in people's faces and actually got physically violent. But the other one, the Jordan Neely case, Daniel Penny case, he was literally getting in people's faces and making violent threats towards people, saying he's literally going to kill people and he ain't afraid to go to jail. Pay attention to these details.
That's going on here. Seems pretty quiet. Now, one of the two homeless men goes over to Jordan Williams and his girlfriend and slaps his girlfriend in the face. And then this happens. So now, as you see from this camera footage, the two men are in the corner struggling, and one of those men pulls out a knife and then stabs the other guy.
I'm pretty sure that right here, you can see the knife in the guy's hand. The guy sitting down, you can actually see the knife in his hand.
Camera footage, the two men are in the corner struggling, and one of those men pulls out a knife and then stabs the other guy.
Okay, let me point out something. This is an aside. This is just a pet peeve of mine. All right, let me bring this video back down. This image. You see a girl here wearing them little house shoes. My personal thoughts, you're getting ready to get on the subway in New York City. Dress appropriately. This ain't time to hang out. You never know what could happen. You never know. You might have to run for your life. You might have to fight for your life. You don't know if you're going to deal with a terrorist. You don't know if you're going to have a criminal coming after you. You don't know if somebody's going to be coming over there trying to assault you. You have no idea. When you're out in public, dress appropriately. And I know it's difficult with ladies because you have work to go to and various things like that. But if it's necessary, bring a change of footwear. Bring some shoe. Carry your good shoes with you. But when you're traveling to and fro, especially in a location that you know has a high crime rate in a bad area, dress appropriately if it's within your ability to do so.
Is an accessible station. The elevator is at the center of the platform.
Sorry. Stop. I just said that. You slap you? Holy shit. You're gonna go to jail.
Let's just see him putting the knife away right there. Let me
So I think it's
rewind.
important to understand the differences between the
back
two
it up
cases.
just a
In this
little bit.
case,
Stop. I just
Watch
said
your right hand.
you slap you? Holy shit. You're gonna go to jail.
See right there in his right hand, he's got a knife. He's folding it up and he's putting it in his pocket. And the details were that he pulled a knife out of his pocket. If you do any research on this video or on this whole situation, this whole case, you'll find that he pulled the knife out. He didn't get it off of the other suspect, the other dude who was acting the fool. He needed to be put in check. He needed to be physically restrained. He needed to be stopped. You're putting your hands on old boy's girl. But I don't know, the situation going on, he felt as if his life or her life were in danger. So he felt like he did what he had to do. We'll hash that out as the video progresses, as more details go along. But again, I want to make sure you have all the details and you know exactly what's going on.
So I think it's important to understand the differences between the two cases. In this case, you saw those two guys. They weren't belligerently telling people they're going to kill them and all that stuff like Jordan Neely did. What they were doing was, harassment. It was harassment. Oh, this, but it wasn't anything violent. And then eventually somebody got pissed off. They got into a struggle and somebody happened to die. We're in the Daniel Penny case. All the passengers said this guy was acting as if he was going to harm people. I was protecting my child. He said he was going to go to jail and he was not going to take no for an answer. All of that stuff matters. So in one case, you had someone who was obviously saying they're going to kill everybody on the train. That person was stopped by multiple passengers. And then this other one, Jordan Williams' girlfriend gets slapped in the face by a homeless guy, and he pulls out a knife and stabs the guy to death. Now, what's going to happen? Well, the Brooklyn DA is going to charge the man who stabbed the homeless guy with manslaughter, but since he has a weapon, he's going to be facing 25 years of life because he not only killed them, but he killed them with a weapon that he wasn't really supposed to have. You're not supposed to walk around New York with knives above 4 inches. So I'm not sure how long it's.
If you're going to walk around, especially in a city like New York, it's bad enough that you're dealing with such high levels of crime in some areas, but you also have these ridiculously woke policies and laws that really hinder your ability to protect yourself, you and your loved ones. So whatever the laws are, whatever the rules are, make sure that when you choose to equip yourself with some kind of tool for protection, for self-defense, make sure you're acting within the bounds of the law. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with this. He could have protected himself had he had a weapon, a knife that was smaller. He said 4 inches has to be smaller than 4 inches or something along those lines. Just make sure, first of all, if you can get out of that city or that state, that would be my first suggestion, because it's just ridiculous there.
But if you kill somebody with a weapon, that enhances the penalty. So Jason Williams, who happens to be black, is facing 25 years in jail for killing this unarmed black man on the train.
All right, buckle up. Marine veteran Danny Penny will be arraigned June 28th in Manhattan Supreme Court. You heard about this. This following a grand jury indictment for the subway death of a homeless man, Jordan Neely. Meanwhile,
oh, and one more thing. It was two black men involved in this one situation here, and a black man was killed. Did you hear BLM come out and start talking about it, protesting anywhere? Now, I wasn't really even aware of this case up until recently, but it's really odd. Well, it's not so odd. I mean, I think we all know that these clowns, BLM I'm talking about, have an agenda. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make themselves popular now. Oh, they were hidden, basically running, hiding out for the last 4 years. Now, all of a sudden, they're trying to make their faces known, make themselves known again. What's going on? What could be happening in our country that would make them decide that they want to get out there and start speaking now because of racism? Could it be, Donald Trump is back in office? When Joe Biden went on, I guess there were no controversial racial situations. There was nothing controversial that happened on a racial level when Joe Biden was around, I guess, in 4 years. There was nothing that went on that was controversial for BLM to decide to show up. I'm being sarcastic. We all know what their agenda is. They're trying to make themselves relevant again. Hopefully no one gives a damn, because Lord knows I don't. BLM is a joke. All they're out to do is get some fortune and fame, and probably more of the fortune than anything else. And if you don't believe me, just look up BLM, Black Lives Matter fraud cases over the last 6 years or so. You'll learn.
Oh, it doesn't end there. Jordan Williams, the man accused of fatally stabbing an ex-con who was attacking his girlfriend, according to a myriad of witnesses, during a different subway struggle, now facing 25 years for manslaughter following an emotional hearing in Brooklyn. Dr. Darren Porcher is now a former NYPD lieutenant and retired U.S. Army official, criminal justice expert. So, Darren, you have two citizens who wanted just to use the subway and ended up fighting for their life. And both find themselves indicted by a grand jury. Both have been charged by the city. First off, let's start with what we know about Jordan Williams. What do you think about this case?
I think that we had an innocent citizen that was stepping to the defense of his girlfriend and is being persecuted by the criminal justice system. And I think that this is inappropriate. I don't think he should have been charged in the first place, but welcome to New York.
Welcome to New York, where we're about 2,000 cops down, where the cops have not been empowered to maybe take preemptive action. No more stop and frisk. So this guy gets on a train and he creates havoc. So in a fight for survival, thankfully, Jordan Williams wins.
Regardless of the situation, when you're looking at both sides, these are my thoughts. I think that there needs to be an appropriate level of force used, and it needs to be able to be justified. It was a force that you used justified. And I say this based on my law enforcement background. But there are also a lot of variables that can impact that. The fact that Jordan Williams here and the young man and the man that was killed in this encounter who was stabbed, it was him and another individual. It was like basically a 2-on-1, not so much of a 2-on-2. His girl would only be able to do so much. And he didn't seem like he was the biggest guy in the world compared to those dudes. So he may have felt as if and been able to articulate why he felt as if deadly force was necessary. And the location plays a role too. You're talking about the New York City subway station where they, not that long ago, had to deploy the National Guard because things were getting so out of hand. Just like Brian Kilmeade was saying, things have gotten so bad where they've had to have the National Guard come out. The law enforcement has had their hands tied. They're down 2,000, I think he said, officers. And it wasn't that long ago where the mayor of New York, where he took somewhere in the neighborhood of a few $100 million out of the budget for the NYPD. He wanted to divert that money to some of these social issues in hopes of educating people so that crime would go down. These people do not think. And again, this is all leads up to where we are now in our culture. People are just tired of the foolishness. But back to the main story, when you open up the door to this kind of nonsense, you get a young man who felt as if he had no other choice.
And now he's going to ultimately pay the price. Here, I hope not. I hope he's exonerated. Jason Goldman is his attorney. Listen.
I still ride the subway. I'm sure many of you do too. And we've seen what's happened. And as I said to the judge, you have two choices right now. You can sit there and get assaulted, and your friends or family or loved ones can get assaulted and seriously injured, or you can fight back and get arrested and maybe get charged, maybe go to Rikers, maybe get released. So, what are you supposed to do? Which option are you supposed to take?
Okay, that lawyer sounds like he's representing Daniel Penny, right? You could change that black guy out and put Daniel Penny up there, right? Because it's the same argument, except Daniel Penny didn't use a knife. He just held the guy down, and the assumption was that he died of a chokehold. But even a medical examiner wasn't really sure Jordan nearly died of a chokehold. But in this particular case, there's no question. He was stabbed to death, right? And this guy said, yeah, I stabbed him, right? And look at him leaking and blah, 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 that type of thing. This guy was okay that he had killed him. So I do agree with Fox News. If this was self-defense, you can prove that this guy attacked Mr. Williams and his girlfriend. Okay, you have a self-defense claim. But what about the stabbing? Should this guy have lost his life because he's yelling at this guy and his girlfriend? No, right? No, that would be the same argument that BLM made. Just because somebody yelling and harassing people on the street doesn't mean they should die. Same thing here. If this guy doesn't have a knife.
That's a really good point he's making there. What would a BLM activist or BLM supporter, to any of y'all listening, watching this video, what do you say to that? You say that this man should not have died just for yelling, which is nonsense. Because if you're making threats and you're getting in people's faces and you're talking about ready to kill somebody and you're acting volatile and you're acting irrational, what should somebody do ultimately? You sit back and do nothing and then let you hurt somebody? Yeah, it's a slippery slope. It's a very shaky ground, but Daniel Penny felt as if he did the right thing. What would you have done? That's what I want some of these folks to think about. What would you do if you were in that situation? You got young people, you got children, you got women, older people, all being threatened by this one dude. Would you intervene? Most likely, no. Now, especially considering all the crap these guys had to go to by trying to step in and do what they believe to be the right thing. And particularly if I was in New York. Now, if I was in a different city, different state, I think my response might be, or my natural tendency might be to protect, because that's basically what I've done for a little over 20 years of my life, even longer than that if you include my military time. And then even before that, when I got into martial arts as a teenager. I've always had this mindset of being a protector. But if you're dealing with somebody who's mentally ill, talking them down doesn't always work. Some people are just that irrational. And you may have to physically intervene if you believe that you have the capacity and the ability to intervene and to stop them. But if you don't, or if you're concerned about what the system might do to you, I think that's a valid concern in this day and age.
The other guy's probably going to be alive, but he did have a knife. So what happens? Do you think race plays an issue on who goes to trial and who doesn't go to trial? Because again, both of these DAs, or one's Manhattan DA, one's a Brooklyn DA, both are city DAs. They both charged both the black guy and the white guy. So you have some consistency here. But what happens with this guy, Mr. Williams, when he goes to the grand jury? Well, the grand jury said, we know he was carrying a knife. We're not going to charge him. We're going to exonerate him at the grand jury. We're not even going to let you get to a trial because this seems clearly self-defense. Even though he had a knife, we're going to call it self-defense.
They're now dropped against Jordan Williams. That's the man who had been charged with fatally stabbing a fellow passenger on a J train earlier this month.
Yeah, Brooklyn grand jury declined to indict, determining he acted in self-defense. Fox 5's Briella Tomasetti joins us now with the very latest. Good morning, Briella.
Yeah, Dan and Tashani, bottom line, Jordan Williams has said this is a decision he will regret every single day for the rest of his life. Jason Goldman, who represents Williams, said it's never a joyous occasion when a life is lost, but Jordan and his loved ones are grateful and relieved that the grand jury saw this for exactly what it was.
Honestly, I was afraid.
1 week after Jordan Williams and his lawyer, Jason Goldman, spoke with us exclusively on Good Day New York, a grand jury has dropped all charges against him. Williams, just 20 years old, was accused of fatally stabbing a homeless man on a J train earlier this month and subsequently charged with manslaughter. Williams testified before the grand jury for about 45 minutes, saying that he acted in self-defense after the victim, Devictor Udrago, punched his girlfriend in the face. Video filmed by another passenger and shown to the grand jury reportedly corroborated that.
All I wanted to do was just get me and my girlfriend off the train safely.
The Brooklyn DA's office released this statement, reading in part that its investigation, quote, included review of multiple videos and interviews with all available witnesses, and that evidence was fairly presented to a grand jury.
Okay, so now the difference in these two cases, I think, is pretty simple. In one case, you had the homeless person execute the threat of physical force. Now, it wasn't deadly physical force. Punching somebody is not deadly physical force, it's just physical force. And he punched this guy's girlfriend. Now, this guy, Jordan Williams, then took.
Now, I'd like to interject here. It could be, punching someone could be considered deadly physical force. Size could be a factor, the health of the individual being struck, the size of the person doing the punching, how hard they hit them. There are factors that could lead to someone throwing a punch to be considered deadly force, or at least enough force to deliver substantial bodily harm. Whereas in the state of Nevada, and I know in a lot of other jurisdictions across the country, that could be considered justification to use deadly force.
Took out a knife and stabbed him to death. So he reacted to physical force with deadly physical force, which generally is not allowed. But in this case, you can say it's clearly self-defense. He's defending his girlfriend from some maniac on a train who's harassing other people. And you saw the level of harassment. Where I think in Jordan Neely's case, Jordan Neely is the person with Daniel Penny. In Jordan Neely's case, Jordan Neely came and was threatening imminent physical force, imminent deadly physical force. I'm going to kill people. I don't mind doing a life sentence. I'm not going to take no for an answer. And even what some of the witnesses said, he started lunging at them. Well, for self-defense, you don't have to wait to be stabbed, to be punched, to be hit, to employ self-defense. The imminent threat of force, you can use force to repel that. And that's what happened in the Daniel Penny case. He used physical force to repel this guy's deadly physical force of threatening to kill people and held him. Now, in both cases, the person died. But in the case with the black guy, guess what? We're going to let him go, even though he used deadly physical force and stabbed the guy to death. Where in Daniel Penny's case, we're going to say, well, we're going to make him go to trial. And technically, it's really because he's white. Because in both situations, all the witnesses on the train said the same thing, right? These guys are heroes. These guys were defending people. Just in one case, the guy happens to be white.
What are your thoughts? Do you think his race, his skin color, talking about Daniel Penny, do you think that played a factor in this whatsoever? And I definitely don't want to be hypocritical, because I hate when other people say, oh, well, so-and-so did XYZ, did ABC because the other person was black. I hate when people do that, because you're assuming. You honestly have no idea. You would have to be able to articulate motive. And in most cases, you would have to be able to read their mind. I mean, it would have to be a clear demonstration of your actions being motivated by the ethnicity of the other individual, which is very hard to prove.
In the other case, that guy happens to be black. But listen to what happens when other people are confronted with this anomaly. The fact that these situations happen very close to each other, but they seem to be being treated very differently, right? Nobody's marching in the street for the guy who Jordan Williams stabbed. Right. No one's marching. BLM probably doesn't even know who that guy is. Don't even care about his name. But against Daniel Penny, they do.
I said, what about the Jordan Williams case here in New York? Same situation, African-American, gets on a subway, ends up killing a guy, grand jury tosses it out at the exact same time as the Penny case.
But that's different. That's different because he used the same weapon that the alleged victim had.
I hate stopping people in mid-sentence, but she's lying about the facts of the case. In the Jordan Williams case,
no surprise coming from CNN, but
Jordan Williams was the person who brought a knife to the scene.
This actually hasn't come out yet, but a few weeks ago, before this incident, there was a woman who actually put a knife right between my eyes. So she literally had it inches from me. Yes. So that honestly is what scared me into starting to carry. And
I was wondering why you were carrying a knife.
Yes.
And it was
again, that points to the reality of the violent nature of the New York City subway system as to why he felt the need to carry a knife.
And Jordan Williams was charged with weapons violation, but obviously the grand jury didn't charge, so it's legal for him. But that knife, he was charged with carrying an illegal weapons charges because he had the knife. Victim had no knife. The only person that had a knife was Jordan Williams. And I understand why she has to lie, because she can't say that it's obvious that it's the same case, right? So she has to lie to try to win this point. Now, I don't know why she's lying. I don't know why she pretends to know the facts of the case, but the only knife in the Jordan Williams case was Jordan Williams's knife.
And she wasn't fact-checked either, so.
The one used to kill the victim in that particular case. So just so we're all clear, she is lying on CNN, and I'm going to fact check her, but I think it's important for you to understand she's lying about the facts of the case.
So he was using his own weapon. He was met with deadly physical force. Jordan Neely, all he had in his pocket was a muffin. All right.
Now, just to be clear, what she's saying is obviously not true. The victim in the Jordan Williams case didn't have a knife. He didn't. The person who bought the knife was Jordan Williams. And I still agree with the verdict that he shouldn't have been charged, and that, hey, that's self-defense. Somebody's beating up your girlfriend, you got to do what you got to do to stop that, right? Self-defense, no doubt about it.
And again, in one of the previous segments when he was on the news program, he admitted to or explained why he brought the knife with him.
And that, hey, that's self-defense. Somebody's beating up your girlfriend, you got to do what you got to do to stop that, right? Self-defense, no doubt about it. But you can't lie to the people. Why is she lying to the public? And CNN's not going to fact check her. Why? Because CNN is okay with her lying about the facts of the case. So at the end of the day, I want you to tell me where I'm wrong in this particular case. I think both these men should have been acquitted. I think both these men didn't do anything wrong. I believe that self-defense is a thing. And I believe if you believe Jordan Williams is guilty of self-defense after he put the knife and stabbed somebody for hitting his girlfriend, then I think you should also believe Daniel Penny is not guilty because he employed self-defense to save other black people. But you won't hear BLM marching for Jordan Williams' victim. You won't hear them saying that Jordan Williams' victim was unhoused. You won't hear them saying that Jordan Williams' victim was unarmed. You won't hear them saying any of that. You won't hear them saying, oh, people harass people on the train all the time, right? Why? Because he happens to be black. And you'll get the reverse for Jordan Neely, right? Jordan Neely was an angel. Jordan Neely, he was a Michael Jackson impersonator, but he was threatening people on a train and saying he was going to kill them. And
like I always say, y'all, details matter. Details absolutely matter. I've already been dealing with this in some of my comments. I'm sure some of y'all are going to be hearing it on your timeline or in conversations with friends or family, whoever it may be. You're going to hear the typical term or discussion that, well, if Kyle had been black, he wouldn't have gotten off. Had Kyle been black, he would have been locked up and they'd have thrown the key away. And honestly, I used to feel like that. That used to be my mindset. I used to have a similar set of beliefs. But by the grace of God, once I was saved, he not only redeemed me, my spirit, he also transformed my mind. Through the reading of the word and being discipled by some really solid men of God, they helped me to think things through and to think things through in a way that, first of all, glorifies and honors God, and secondly, in a way where I challenge the common narrative that is often fed to us. The reference I'm using is the author is Dr. John Lott, and the book is The War on Guns, Arming Yourself Against Gun Control Lies. Once again, the book is The War on Guns, and the subtitle is Arming Yourself Against Gun Control Lies. And the author is Dr. John Lott. Stand Your Ground stands up for minorities, something that you ain't going to hear turning on CNN or MSNBC. Stand Your Ground laws have saved Black lives in dramatic cases around the country. 3 years ago, Darrell Stanberry of Detroit was confronted by an armed man who was trying to take his car. He told WJBK, if it wasn't for the Stand Your Ground law, right now I would be in jail and my life could have been taken at that point. Or take the case of the Black Florida man in Duval County who was beaten bloody after being attacked in a parking lot. The case decided just a couple of weeks after the Zimmerman verdict was aptly summarized by headlines such as, quote, "Man says stand your ground law saves lives." So anyone who doesn't really know, stand your ground law was the case that it wasn't even used in the George Zimmerman trial, but it's basically the self-defense law in the state of Florida. Let's move on. Those who claim racism point to data compiled by the Tampa Bay Times, but make sure you stick around to the end so you have a full, robust understanding of what's being said and the data that's being shared. Those who claim racism point to the data compiled by the Tampa Bay Times. Up through October 1st, 2014, the newspaper had collected 119 cases in which people charged with murder relied on Florida's stand your ground law. The Times, quote unquote, shocking finding: defendants who killed a Black person got off with no penalty in 67% of cases. This is greater than 50% of defendants who killed a white person and got off. Okay, like I said, make sure you stay tuned. If you stop right now, you're gonna miss the whole argument, the whole discussion. They never discussed the fact that those who killed Hispanics are even more likely to face no penalty, 80% of the time. If these results really imply discrimination, why would Florida's Hispanics be discriminated against so much more frequently than Black? Black and white victims are usually killed by members of their own race. Now, that's just statistically true. You look at the FBI Uniform Crime Report and anybody, CDC, anyone who's done any level of research, they'll go back, they'll point to this as being the reality. The Tampa Bay Times data shows that in cases where stand your ground was invoked as a defense, 76% of Blacks were killed by other Blacks. Now stick with me here. It's about to get even better. Similarly, the vast majority of whites were killed by other whites. So that just verifies the data. This, however, does not appear to be true of Hispanics. Since Blacks are most often killing each other, sadly, but it's true. Any murder is sad and traumatic. There is a flip side to the high acquittal rate. More Blacks killing each other, high acquittal rate. Keep that in mind. There's a flip side to the high acquittal rate in stand your ground cases involving Black victims. It means a lower conviction rate for the Black defendants in these cases. In fact, and here's where it really starts to get good, y'all. Blacks were more likely than whites to succeed with the stand your ground defense. The success rate was 64% for Blacks and 60% for whites. Hispanic defendants had a 67% success rate, making them most likely to be acquitted. If Blacks are supposedly being discriminated against because their killers so often are not facing any penalties, wouldn't it also follow that Blacks are being discriminated in favor of when Blacks who claim self-defense under the stand your ground laws are convicted at a lower rate than whites? And it would. Let me read that again. If Blacks are supposedly being discriminated against because their killers so often are not facing any penalty, wouldn't it also follow that Blacks are being discriminated in favor of, seeing how Blacks are the majority of those who kill each other, whether it's justified or unjustified? In this case, we're talking about justified killings in self-defense, in favor of when Blacks who claim self-defense under the stand your ground laws are convicted at a lower rate than whites. It goes on further. If this is indeed a measure of discrimination, rather than merely reflecting something different about these particular cases, why are conviction rates so low for Hispanics who raise the stand your ground defense? The figures used to support claims of racism are cherry picking from the data. Now we're going to keep going and we're almost done. The Tampa Bay Times data suggests why people who shoot Blacks and use the stand your ground defense are more likely to be acquitted. The data show that compared to whites, Blacks who were killed in these stand your ground confrontations were 26 percentage points more likely to be armed with a gun, a fourth more likely out of all of them, a fourth more likely to be carrying a gun. The Blacks who were killed were also 25 percentage points more likely to be in the act of committing a robbery, home invasion, or burglary. Robberies has violence already inherently in the definition. And the home invasions, someone breaking in your home or burglarizing your home, attempting to break in or your property or your store, whatever it may be. There could be an easy assumption of violence, or at least a threat of that. And finally, both a witness and physical evidence are 13 percentage points less likely to be present when a Black person is killed. All of these factors may explain why convictions are less common when Blacks are killed.